Okay. So thank you so much for being here. I can't actually see the chat the way that I'm presenting. So our room monitor is going to jump in if you guys are putting stuff in the chat. But please just interrupt me and say whatever you want, ask questions. This is my favorite topic to talk about, so I hope we can squeeze it all in into our hour together. But seriously, just let me know what questions you have and we'll work together throughout the hour. So my name is Dr. Sarah Dalton. I'm an assistant professor here at the Chicago School. I primarily work in the doctoral program, but sometimes I get lucky enough to teach human sexuality in the master's program. And I think when all of us are in our master's program, there's only so much time and so much information we can kind of cram into that. So there's lots and lots and lots that you don't get to cover. So that is why I came up with this presentation, Sex Positive Education, Everything You Didn't Cover in Grad School, and how you can better support your clients. And I also have a private practice, and I am a sex therapist, so I primarily see individuals, couples who have some sort of sex-related or gender-related issue. I think it's really important to start off this discussion by saying and acknowledging that I am a white professor at this very open and accepting university. I have the privilege to talk about this topic without any sort of problems coming my way, but that's not the case for many in higher ed and elsewhere. And I recognize that the topics come from a place of privilege. Lots and lots of people, students, clients, supervisees, they wouldn't be able to talk about this, whether it's culturally, socially, religiously, morally, anything else. So I think we need to remember as clinicians and supervisors and professors that our cultural humility has to be at the forefront of our work, always remembering that these topics are not easy to talk about. So we're just going to get into it. We're going to talk about what you learned in your master's program, what maybe was missing. We're going to talk about why it's important. We're going to talk about everything and anything. So there are some images throughout the presentation that I hope you're okay with seeing, but just in case not, here's your alert. And we can't cover everything in this presentation. We're going to run out of time for sure. Okay, so this is where I need you all to jump in and say it out loud since I can't see the chat. What did you learn in your master's program about human sexuality?
Currently, as someone who is in her first year of the master's program, I have not gotten there yet because unfortunately it is something that is only offered as an elective. So I'm not going to be able to take that until my last year in the program. And I have told many people, friends, colleagues, partners, family members that I think that human sexuality should not be relegated to an elective. It's something that everyone should at least have a little bit of knowledge of. So that's my first impression of it.
You are right. And that is the case in many states. It's built into the curriculum. But because we cover students all, throughout the country, some states require classes that are not human sexuality, and we need to give students the space to have time to do it. But in my state where I live in Pennsylvania, it's required, like built into the curriculum. So it was never an option. It wasn't an elective for me, but that's why it is here. I can see the chat now, so go ahead and throw it in there if you have questions. Other things that okay, so that was like a deficit, right? It should be in our program at the beginning and it's not. What other things do you all think that you learned or missed out on? All right.
I took human sexuality in my undergraduate course, and I'm planning on taking it again, as you know, in the fall. Do you think that there will be a big jump at the master's level of like counseling human sexuality versus just learning about it from a psychology standpoint in undergrad?
Yes. Okay. Good question. I would certainly hope so, because now you're going to be learning in the master's program, how do I apply this information to actual people that I'm counseling, where I feel like in undergrad, maybe it's learning about, and some of these topics that I have here, like how does sexual development work, and how do we protect ourselves against STDs, contraception, all those sorts of things. We might talk a little bit about diverse affectional orientations and gender identity, but you don't actually learn how to counsel somebody. So I would hope so, Hannah, for sure. And I use the term affectional orientation. It is like probably up and coming, you might say, term, but I think it's more appropriate for anyone that might identify as not straight. And the reason is because it's who you feel affection for, who you're attracted to, who you want to be with. And we don't say to straight people, like, who do you want to have sex with? And so sexual orientation really just is a term that we try to avoid, though you'll probably see it throughout this presentation and in research, because that is the term that's still used.
Dr. Dalton?
Yeah.
Would you say that that is maybe the more correct term to use then, affectional orientation as opposed to sexual orientation?
I personally think so, and you will see a shift like in the literature and in the ACA competencies, because we're trying to shift away from sexualizing something that is really just, an identity and how somebody operates. So yes, I think so. I think you can't have a sex presentation without this, so I just put it in there because this is what I feel like sex ed often is, like, just don't do it. You'll get pregnant and die. So let's think about what is sex positive education. I think you'll all see I'm a sex positive therapist. People say that, that's really wonderful, but like, what does that really mean? And in curriculum, and then as a therapist, it would mean that you're focusing on consent and pleasure. So not just, did we have sex? It's like, were we okay with it throughout the whole entire time? Was it pleasurable? Did I enjoy it? That you can have open discussions about all aspects of sex, that you can have open and clear knowledge about sexual attitudes, reproductive health, sexual behaviors. We can discuss gender and how it relates to sex. We always want to be thinking about safer sex practices, consensual sex, and focusing on positive personal experiences. So would you consider yourself a sex positive therapist, or do you hope to become one? I feel like these are the core areas of it. I don't know if any of you watch this show. It's kind of interesting. Of course, we can critique everything, but it's the point that I think this show really does is normalizing all sorts of sex education, especially for young people. But sometimes TV is like the only place that people really learn anything about sex. So then we get to college or grad school and we learn a piece of sex ed, but why should it be sex positive in graduate school? We've talked about that it's a core piece of somebody's development, right? It should be there maybe from the beginning of our master's program. I think a lot of programs are lacking more advanced sexual identities and interests, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. We don't have enough time. Are there any professionals here who feel like, oh man, I see something in my practice that I was never prepared for and I wish we would have talked about it? Okay, well, I'll just say, I don't think my master's program prepared me for any sort of poly relationships, polyamory. Maybe it acknowledged that it existed, but I wasn't sure how you clinically treat that. A lot of different, kink, yes, exactly. Like, it's out there, but you're not really sure what it is. There's many variations for sure. Thank you. There's a lot out there. So I think sex and disability is not talked about. I do have a presentation about that tomorrow, but we're also going to talk a little bit about it today. So our clients need therapists who can talk about any sort of sex issue, and we have to bring it up. So I've worked with clients who maybe they've been in individual or couples therapy for years, and they'll come to the first session and they ask a whole intake about their sex life and interests. And they'll say, never in my 6 years of seeing our last therapist did they even ask about sex. And I find that so crazy. So we need to be able to talk about it in all of the ways. they'll say they haven't found a sex positive therapist. They never talked to anyone who they felt like was sex positive. And they seek out specifically the certification that I have, which is a certified sex therapist, because they think that's the only people that they can talk to. But really, it's my hope that all of you would be able to be sex positive. You can't say I'm a certified sex therapist if you're not, right? That would be unethical. But you can say I have significant interest and studies in sex-related issues, and you will have a ton of clients. So I think that's important to remember, that we all can do all of this. Our sexuality is so much more than like an act of sex. It involves all of these things: health, fantasy, sensuality, desire, intimacy, our hopes and dreams, our partners, our values, fetishes, then also, of course, media, culture, identity. It's all of these things that help create someone's sexuality. So it's not just what are you doing in the bedroom and who is it with? It's all of these things and more. So do you feel like you were personally challenged when you were learning about sex, and in what sort of ways? So like you had to think about maybe an identity that was different than your own, or a kink that was something you didn't understand. Do any of you feel like you were personally challenged?
I think for me, learning about fetishes was kind of difficult to understand because we were told that the difference between kinks and fetishes were that a kink is something that you would appreciate being included, but you don't necessarily need it. Whereas a fetish is something that is required to achieve arousal. And I believe that that is mostly correct, but maybe a little simplified. But some of the fetishes that we learned about, I could not really wrap my head around them, but I could see how they could become enough of an issue in a person's life, both just personal and a sex life, to where they would need to seek out help. But we didn't really learn how to help them.
Mhm. Yeah, kinks and fetishes are something that someone might want in their sex life, and it's not always a problem. Often it's something that they're looking for partners that can fulfill those interests. And as a therapist, I think one of the most important things to do is to ask, what does this mean for you? Or, in what ways do you use this? Or in what ways do you find this pleasurable? Those sorts of questions, because then we don't have to guess. And even if it's something that we personally couldn't wrap our head around, like we're not really sure how that works, it doesn't really matter, right? It's interesting to our client. It's something that they want in their life. But to learn them all and to understand them all is really hard in grad school because there are so many. Did you have to pick any sort of population or sexual issue that was new to you and challenged you and explore it? So, for example, did you have to think about individuals who have sexually abused children? Or have you had to think about your religious beliefs that maybe are super different in terms of sex and sexuality? I hope so. Our program does for sure. Not that you have to specifically pick individuals who have abused children, but a lot of people do go that route because you have to pick something that you find to be like the most challenging. And at least when I've taught the class, a lot of people picked that. It's a challenging topic. It's hard to work with as a professional, but just like all things, when we get to know our client and understand why exactly they're here in therapy, you often can make sense of it. A lot of our work has to be addressing biases. And so we're going to talk about some of these biases that we might have. So when you hear like sex therapy, it's just somebody who can specialize in these issues. And like I said, it can really be any of us. So sexual functioning, sexual feelings and intimacy, pain issues, difficulty experiencing orgasm, desire issues, working through trauma, erectile dysfunction, low libido. You can see all the rest. Confidence issues, problematic sexual behavior. That would be anything that somebody does maybe so often or in a way that it is interrupting their life. For example, like a lot of people reach out to me because they feel like they watch too much porn. And so it's becoming problematic in their life because like maybe they're not going to work, or maybe they're, not showing up to their family events because they're just watching porn all day. That would be a problematic sexual behavior. So it's really any of these things and more, of course, but these things. Okay, this is just according to me, so don't write this down, don't cite me. But I really feel like all of these areas are kind of the groundwork to sexuality and to having some sort of sex, whether it's good or bad or anything in between. I often see couples who say, we're not having enough sex and it really upsets me, and our relationship is a mess because of sex. But then I'll say, tell me about your social connection and what do you do together? They'll say, well, we never hang out together because we are really busy. Okay, well, it's really hard to not hang out all day long and come home and then like somehow you're supposed to be attracted to each other, right? Or financial or career connection. So that means like maybe one partner's spending all of their money and you're really, really stressed out and you feel like every day is just working to save money. Well, you're going to come home and there's going to be some lack of connection. All of these areas, and I can talk about any of them that you feel like you want more information on, but I feel like all of these we kind of have to have in place so that there is the potential that we would be attracted to someone and that we would maybe want to have sex with them. And none of these areas do you have to have the same ideas. So for example, like religion, you don't have to have the same religion, or you don't have to like go to a service together every week in order to be a good couple. What you need to do is have an understanding of what does this mean for our life. Okay, so then after all of these first areas, then I think is physical intimacy, and that just meaning like we actually sit next to each other, we maybe touch each other on the couch or whatever, and then sex. So I think all of those things usually come before somebody who has a sex problem. This is
When you
just,
talk about, oh,
Mhm.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
When you talk about family slash child rearing intimacy, is this how you personally were brought up as a child, or how your partner was brought up, or how you might be bringing up your own children?
Super good question. I feel like it's both. But when I wrote it, I was thinking about, do you have the same ideas about raising a family if that's something that you choose? Because I see so many relationships where one partner wants to dedicate all of their time to their children and the other person says, well, we need some time together. And they really, really battle on what's that going to look like for them. And of course, that was a 2-partner example, but often there are many partners involved. And so we have to think about, how do we have time for each other? What do kids mean to us? What does our family mean to us so that we can actually have time together? Yep. So I will do kind of an inventory of all of these things, talk to them, and usually pretty darn quickly you find out, okay, one of these things stands out, and that is really the challenge before the sex. Because you can't focus on, well, here's some ideas about sex when you spend 0 time together, or you're so stressed out about your money that you don't want to be around the other person. You're not going to be working on your sex life. So I think it's really important as clinicians that we understand what bodies even look like and what is happening and what are the anatomical like terms. So these are just resources you all might want to look at, but the labia library is really great. And I use it all the time in sex therapy. It's just like a whole bunch of labia. And so the point is to normalize for people, like you look exactly as you should and everything is good. We can't just have those like scientific drawings that have crazy little lines to things and people have no idea what it is and who ever looks at themselves like that. So I think more anatomical drawings are really, really helpful. We need to know the anatomy and we need to be able to say it. So I see so many clients who will use terms like, I don't know, like my lady bits and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh man, this is going to be really hard to talk about. So just use the actual terms. And then also ways that we can create comfort in somebody's body. For example, if they're a trans man, they might use packing or binding for trans men as well. Many, 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 obviously different lists of ways that people find comfort in themselves, but we need to ask about it and use the right terms. Another topic that I think we don't often cover in grad school is masturbation. And there are so many discussions about it. For example, like, how do you do it? And there are so many different apps that actually will walk you through like how to masturbate if you've never done that, or maybe you're working with a teenager who's interested and they're not sure what to do. Clients who will ask if it's normal, if they will say, can we do mutual masturbation? Like, can I be with partners and we all are doing it? Some people feel a lot of shame or they feel gross. What if they're personally against it? What if they've never done it before? Can I do it in my relationship? A lot of people are worried if their partner or somebody they know masturbates too much. I always question what is too much. And I think the threshold for me personally, when I'm seeing clients is like, is it interrupting your life? Is there something like it's happening so much or it's happening in such a way that you're not showing up to your life? That's a problem. Some people feel like they will be ruining partnered sex if they masturbate often or at all. So kind of tackling some of those myths that that's just normal human sexuality and it's all good. These are some resources like The Pleasure Is All Yours. Oh yeah, and then this bottom picture that a lot of times information revolves around male pleasure. And obviously I think that should not be the case. It should be all genders, anyone. Okay, I'm pretty sure your human sexuality didn't like bust out the sex toys. So I think it's important that we know what they are, but also that we know like different identities. So all of these resources are queer sex toy stores because I think it applies to most of my clients that I see, and it can obviously apply to anyone, but there are many. And I think when I'm meeting either with individuals or with couples, I'll just ask them to go onto some of these websites and just start to just see if something even seems enjoyable, because sometimes they get a little scared or they get overwhelmed. But if you just go onto one of the websites, maybe click around, there might be something that they say, yeah, I'm willing to try this. And then we can kind of go from there. The reason that I think sex toys are helpful for people is that number one, it can be fun, it can break up the monotony, it can be adaptive if somebody has some sort of disability, but also it really opens up the discussion around sexuality. Like it's not just penetrative sex, it's not the only option out there in the world, though a lot of people think it is. We can use any sort of toys or combinations with touch and other sorts of pleasure. So when I was in grad school, I had a teacher who's passed away, but I loved him so much. And he was older at the time. And he brought out this little plastic bucket, and it was in person. And he dumped out all of these sex toys that had all sorts of cords and things on it that probably would have just like electrocuted you. And I just remember thinking, whoa, this man is crazy. And that was the beginning of me becoming a sex therapist. So anyway. Okay, so porn is another topic that, you know, we obviously know it exists, but we don't often learn about, is porn good? Is it bad? I don't think it's that simple either way. I think that there are limits of when porn can be used, and you have to think about what is that limit for me? When is it good? How do I use it? And then how do I use it in relationships? You might have feelings about it. You might have grown up thinking porn is awful or porn abuses women or something like that. And there certainly are lots of terrible porns out there. So you might have feelings about it. There is a whole industry of people that are trying to make more ethical porn and more realistic porn. But again, you're going to have your own thoughts about it, and that's okay. What if one partner thinks it's okay and the other person doesn't, or other people, right? So that could be a conflict. How do we use it in our relationships? I've seen many people where one person says it's totally fine and the other thinks that porn is cheating and they're about to get a break up or get a divorce or something. So there's a lot of negotiation on how do we figure out what this means to us. A problematic amount of porn we talked about, and then the types of porn. So I've seen many clients, but one that will always stand out to me who was very, very ashamed of the type of porn that he watched. And so, you know, it worked for him sexually. It was a porn that is out there, that exists, right? but just felt a lot of shame about what does this mean about me as a person. And so all of our work together was sort of normalizing and then creating rules that the client wanted, not me, but rules about when would this porn be used. So that was like just an example of how we had to navigate that. And then I've had couples where one person was just appalled by the type of porn the other person was interested in. So, you know, everyone has their own interests. So that's a bit of our discussion sometimes around porn with adults. Porn with children, there's a lot of words on here, so don't read them all. But I just think it's important that you recognize when you're working with children that everybody is only a click or two away from porn. It's out there all of the time. And parents very much freak out about it, which, understandable. But you need to think about some discussion points. So if a kid sees porn and you're working with them in therapy, you might want to talk about what images did you like and what did you not. You need to talk about porn is adult entertainment. It's not education. So they're not talking about safe sex. They're not talking about pleasure. Often they're not talking about consent. And those are things that younger people need to understand. It doesn't properly represent bodies, sex, consent, relationships. They're not always natural bodies. Porn will fetishize certain groups, which I think is really important to recognize, and many other discussion points here. So ethical porn exists, it's just harder to find. So one of the best resources, I think, for people who are working with young kids is Sex Positive Families. And it's a website, and then they also have trainings and an Instagram app, but they have really, really wonderful resources where they'll break it down by age and what's appropriate. There's resources, sometimes like books to buy to talk about these things, but I refer a lot of clients and their kids to that website. Take a breath, you can talk about it. So a lot of times clinicians will think, oh my gosh, a kid watched porn and they shut down. I don't know, you might be thinking, I wouldn't know what to say, and that's okay. Just take a breath. You want to reassure the kid that they're not in trouble. You want to label, you've watched videos and naked pictures of people online. That's called porn, and porn is not for children. And then talk about it in a safe way. Help them identify a safety plan. I think this is awesome because we do this with our clients all the time, right? But if you come across porn again, or you want to learn more about sex or bodies, what can you do? Check for understanding and affirm the experience. So Amaze is a really, you see down here at the bottom, Amaze has podcasts about sex ed, Sex Positive Families, like I said, has really good info. So don't shut down. We can work with kids about porn.
Dr. Dalton, there's a question in the chat about getting a copy of these slides.
Oh, yeah,
Do you know if you'll be able to post or share them anywhere?
Sure, I guess I will share them for sure, but I'm not sure how that happens. I'm sure that Colleen can figure it out for us because she has she has your contact. So I think that's how we'll have to do it. Yeah, but yes, I'm happy to share this. So now go ahead.
Before moving on from that topic, do you have, I guess, like any experience maybe to share or advice on when pornography is showing things that it's like consensual non-consent, or things that might get a little dangerous like that, or showing adults who look like children? When might that become something that could be a problem for an adult, and might like kind of lead to other problems? Like, is this person seeking out pornography where these women look like children because they are actually attracted to children? Or have you had any experience with anything like that?
Yeah, so I think it's important that you always think about sexual kink or fetishes does not mean that the person wants to actually do that. That's why they're looking for someone who is an adult dressed as a child. That's called age play, right? So of course, I'm sure there are people that have existed in the history of people that are doing exactly what you said, but in general, they're looking at porn because they want to avoid they wouldn't be interested in children. So it's not like what you're interested in sexually is some sort of cover for what you want to secretly do. That's not the case. So many times I will just ask, like, why is this important to you? Why do you find it interesting to watch porn where somebody acts as a small child? And I mean, I've had clients who have said, well, I never had anyone who really took care of me, or I felt really neglected. And so when I watch this, I find it warm and cuddly and wonderful in all these ways because somebody is taking care of a younger child. That was one client that I can specifically remember. So I think it's just important to learn about it. Yes, there are people out there who are perpetrators of some sort of, violence or inappropriate things, but that's not often the case. So just trying to think what other things you asked. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, for the most part. Thank you.
We'll keep talking about some of these things. I know pornography is a big topic. Like we probably could spend a whole hour on it because people have such feelings about it. And I think like all issues that we have in counseling, we need to think about, maybe this is my personal belief and maybe this is what I personally think about porn. But if a client is bringing that to us, how can we just learn about what they're interested in, why it's important, and if it's working for their life or not. We're going to go into monogamish, so like kind of monogamous, but not really, and all these other sorts of identities. So there is this umbrella term called ethical non-monogamy. So maybe you've heard of that, probably not in grad school, that's okay. But this is the romantic relationships that are not completely between two people. It's so different for everybody in every sort of relationships. So there are many different types. Just like all identities, I feel like it's not important to memorize what are these different structures. I think it's important to be open to our clients are coming to us and what is important to them. Keep that in mind with all of this stuff. But when there are multiple people involved in some sort of relationship, there have to be rules and expectations. So what are your rules and expectations about relationship and sex and how we go about life? How do we communicate with one another? What are our goals? How do we have safety, both physical and health-wise, STD-wise? And what are our boundaries and expectations? So for example, if there are 3 partners in a relationship, is it expected that you spend certain evenings together, or is it expected that you don't talk about that? It's different for everybody. I thought this image was just kind of funny. How many partners do you have? Sometimes it is very hard to keep track of as a therapist. So I will sometimes do a bit of a genogram or a family tree, sort of who is in a relationship with who and how does that work. I'm working with someone right now that has 16 different partners, and oof, my brain I am not that great at remembering things, so I write it down. How to practice ethical non-monogamy. You need to communicate. Everybody's communicating openly and honestly. You ensure that you agree with one another. You discuss the long-term relationship goals, check in with one another, and establish clear boundaries. This, you can't even see probably some of these words, and that's okay. But these are just different types of ethical non-monogamy. And so it's ethical because everyone agrees. Non-monogamy meaning there's multiple partners. So polyamory is one part of that. BDSM play and non-monogamy, swinging, casual sex. Then there's cheating, open relationships. It goes on and on and on. You could study this and that would be awesome, but I think it's way easier just to ask, who is everyone and why is this important? So polyamory, which you've probably heard of, or poly people, and open relationships, they fall under that umbrella of ethical non-monogamy. Here's some definitions, but polyamory looks different in all relationships. It may include multiple people in a relationship, or one person has multiple partners. So I work with people right now where one partner does not want any other partners, but their person that they describe as their primary partner has many other partners. That idea of a primary relationship is not always the case. It just happens to be with those people. Open relationships generally do not involve commitment. You might just be seeing other people, exploring sexual interests. Relationship anarchy is there's no ranking of other partners, so everyone's just equal. We have other partners. Monogamish is mostly monogamous, but occasionally have outside sexual relationships. If I told you how many couples I see that identify as monogamous who are sleeping with other people, I think you'd probably be surprised, maybe. So this happens so much in our clinical work. And then polygamy is when there's multiple, sorry, something just made a noise, when there's multiple spouses and it's not legal in the US. It could be ethical, but often it involves coercion and exploitation, and that is why it's not allowed. These are really good books for clinicians, I think. The Therapist's Guide to Consensual Non-Monogamy, The Ethical Slut, which has been around forever, and The Leather Couch, Clinical Practice with Kinky Clients. I have them all in my own library, and I give people The Ethical Slut all the time. So it's been around a long time. Oh yeah, yay, someone's read it, that's good. How to explore it. So your clients will ask you how they should navigate ethical non-monogamy. And if you are a monogamous person in your life, or that's the only way you can visualize relationships, it might be very challenging to do this. But you need to keep in mind, we are non-judgmental always as therapists. Their relationship doesn't have to align with yours. It doesn't matter what they're doing as long as it's working for them. You may not understand it, and that's okay, but you want to help them discuss what are the rules, what are the expectations in this relationship, how does everyone communicate, what are the challenges, the hopes, the dreams, just the same as you would help a couple who maybe was like thinking about getting married. You want to sort of help them think about all the different parts of a relationship and make sure they're prepared. You do the same thing for this. Here's some other books. But the Ethical Slut's Guide to Thriving in Non-Monogamy, that's a good one. Okay, I'm running out of breath. Are you all doing okay? Okay, good. All right. So BDSM and kink is another whole area of sex in counseling that probably you didn't learn that much about. There's a lot of different terms. They're here on this. We're going to talk about them. One of the things I think is so wonderful about people who practice BDSM and different types of kink is that aftercare is always a really big focus for them. And I wish that more people would do that in their sex life, which is thinking about what does my partner or partners need after this sexual experience. I see so many straight couples, sorry to, talk badly, but they'll have sex and then they'll turn over and they never talk about it. And often the woman will feel like, I didn't really get what I needed, or it wasn't really that enjoyable, and nobody ever talks about it. So I think that concept of aftercare is really important. BDSM is the umbrella term. All these different things kind of fall underneath it. It includes bondage, discipline, dominance, submission. I think a lot of times you think of like 50 Shades of Grey or something like that, like some sort of movie. I think that BDSM, especially the idea of you see downer couple, dom or dominant, that's a person who's sort of predetermined to be in charge of the sexual experience. I see a lot of clients who have had some sort of sexual abuse in their past, or maybe even a medical issue where they feel like they didn't really have a lot of ownership over their body. And now they'd really like to enter into sex with their partners and be in charge of it and feel like they have a lot of ownership. So I see that used a lot to kind of regain sexuality. So it's not anything dirty or scary. It's somebody saying like, I want to be in charge of this. A kink is just something that somebody's interested in, anything from like being tied up or being a little aggressive, but also sometimes people really find it interesting to get off on like paying for their partner to do something, or being in charge of, like money for the two of them. And that's something that maybe you wouldn't think is like so sexual, but that they put it into their sex life and it works for them.
Dr. Dalton, I have a question.
Yes, please.
So you talked about earlier how there are certain cultures that, there's a stigma around talking about sex and kinks and stuff like that. How do you help a client who is from a culture that has shamed, talks about sex, realize that what they are into is normal, or to make them feel that they're not ashamed? How do you get them to feel comfortable to even acknowledge that what they're into is something that should be normalized?
Yeah, totally. So what I think should be normalized is maybe a place that other people couldn't necessarily get, but I do try to help them understand that like a lot of people do have these thoughts. This is what it might look like for other people. And then they can kind of decide, is that something I feel comfortable going into? Or I see people all the time who maybe they only want to watch a certain type of pornography or a certain video about some of these things because they don't really personally want to engage in it. And that's cool too. That's totally fine. So I try to normalize, I try to offer that maybe this is something you might want to think about or provide resources so they can learn about it. But we never want them to feel like there's some sort of certain level of openness they need to get to, because that's that can be harmful. Just and another example is like if somebody is queer and we might think as clinicians, it's great for you to be out and be who you are, but that's not safe in their life. We would never want to do that. So it's kind of the same thing. It works in a consensual relationship where you talk about your experience. Yeah, definitely. Everybody should be talking. I think that's like the key to all of this. Aftercare is this idea that you focus on the physical, emotional, and social needs of you and your partners. You show kindness and respect. You honor the vulnerability of sex, like what we just did was, powerful, or, whatever you want to do, but it's vulnerable. And you continue pleasure and intimacy after some sort of touch. I mean, I feel like it should be this way for everybody. And I don't think this is so scary, right? If you feel like I have no idea about BDSM and you just think of this idea that everybody's taking care of themselves after sex, I think that's important. All right, we're running out of time. Disability and sex is a whole area that we could have like many presentations about, but you need to think about what maybe you have in your idea, how you have in your mind about sex, or how you might be able to help couples. It might not work for everybody. They might have different abilities. Their body might work in different ways. This is a whole entire specialty within sex therapy. There are some resources like Crippling Up Sex with Eva. This person, Andrew Gurza, who's a queer disabled person whose bio says queer disabled and loves having sex. Those weren't my words. But there are a lot of resources out there of people who talk about their experiences with a disability and what does sex look like. I was just talking to one of my friends before this who had a spinal cord injury. She walks with walking sticks, she calls them. And she said that strangers will walk up to her and say, "Can you have sex?" She says, "Can you?" And I said, probably they are struggling if they are asking you, a total stranger, about sex. Erica Hart is someone who I love and has a lot of different presentations available. They are an AASECT certified sex educator. AASECT is the organization that certifies sex therapists, counselors, and educators. But they have so many different workshops that you can attend. But Erica went through breast cancer and now is one of those people that uses a lot of kink ideas sort of to like regain ownership over their body. So I think this is great. And they have a website and also Instagram, things like that. When we think about the idea of minority stress theory, which you might remember from grad school, which is that when you have some sort of minority person, it is stressful. There are negative mental health implications. When we add those on top of each other, like the person is Black and they're queer and they're disabled and they're interested in kink, the potential minority stress is major. There could be major, major negative implications. So this was just a resource that I found that was this couple talking about being Black, queer, and disabled. When we think about gender dysphoria and body dysmorphia, is maybe obsessing about what your body looks like or feeling discomfort in your body, having panic about your body. Of course, I think a lot of you probably think about trans individuals, but this could be anyone who's uncomfortable with different parts of their body. And so a lot of our work will have to be, what do you like about your body? Where do you feel comfortable? How do you stay present when you're in some sort of sexual experience and you're not sort of dissociating and watching it all happen? A lot of people have panic attacks during any sort of body touch. So what we do as clinicians is we try to help them understand that sex drive can change depending on the day, the situation, the environment, anything like that. You don't owe anyone anything. That's always the rule. You can tell your partners your boundaries about touch, words, expectations. You don't have to be naked to engage in sex. You can be comfortable. So there are a lot of different sex activities that like I'll ask people to go give a try with themselves or with partners. And I'll say, you know, the goal is that you might be naked, but why don't you get as naked as you feel comfortable with? And sometimes they'll come back and say, well, I left all my sweatpants on and my sweatshirt. That's fine. That's a good start. And then we can continue to work on how do you be comfortable in your body. If there are certain biological terms for body parts and it's adding to dysphoria, don't use them. Like, so you don't have to talk about a penis if that's like the thing that makes you the most dysphoric, for example. We can always revoke our consent. Our boundaries have to be respected all of the time. Mistakes happen. So even in a relationship, you might be touched in a way that you're not okay with. And so how do we recover from that? What's the safety plan? How do you take care of yourself?
Excuse me, Dr. Dalton, can you say a little bit more about newer ways of looking at the sexual response cycle? Recently have read about how, you know, sex doesn't have to be goal-oriented or always with the goal of achieving orgasm, but being in the present and enjoying, you know, each other. A lot of what you alluded to. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think that is one of the biggest challenges that people have to overcome. They might think, I've never had an orgasm or hasn't been powerful enough, or that's their problem, they think, you know? And so I will really try to talk about the many different types of pleasure and what are you looking to achieve. And so let's just take an orgasm off the table. What else would feel really nice to you? What would feel like you're connecting with yourself or with a partner? And so we try to explore, what are you comfortable with? What would feel enjoyable? How do you want to do it? And that could be, again, with masturbating or sex toys, whether you're with a partner or not. And when you take away that goal of orgasm that a lot of people have, and also the goal of penetrative sex, a lot of people feel like that's the only way. When you take those things away, we can help our clients sort of explore what else they're really interested in. And that is always just a journey, many different sessions talking about that. But I really think we have to take those goals away. And usually when people calm down, they feel less anxiety, they're not so stressed about their body, then they will really enjoy that experience. So hopefully that answers. Go ahead.
Crystal in the chat brought up Come As You Are by Emily, I might butcher this, Nagoski, and The Principles of Pleasure on Netflix.
Yes, it's somewhere in here, I think, or maybe it's my one tomorrow. But Emily Nagoski is an AASECT certified sex educator. Come As You Are has a workbook and it has a new edition. So if you have an old one, you might want to get the new one. And then The Principles of Pleasure has Emily Nagoski in it, as well as Erica Hart, who I showed you earlier, and lots of other really important sex educators. Oh, I'm sorry, Principles of Pleasure. I don't know if I said the wrong thing. Principles of Pleasure is on Netflix. Come As You Are is a book. And those are really good to get the conversation started. I will say that Come As You Are is very like straight focused and definitely focuses on women. That's okay, but it's not for everyone. So you wouldn't want to just refer it to everybody. There's a lot of penis issues, erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation. I always will tell clients, you've got to get a medical evaluation because there are so many things related to bodies and breath and medications that might be causing this issue. But also we can use CBT to focus on relaxation, to think about what creates a really good sex life, to stay in the moment. Sometimes penis owners will do like counting techniques to stay focused on counting instead of worried about ejaculation. There's a lot to say about that, but Sensate Focused Touch is a Sensate Focused Touch is a sex therapy intervention that I use with most clients, but there's a whole workbook about it. I don't think we're going to have time to talk about that. And you don't have to stress about it because you can learn about it if you want to become a sex therapist. I work with a lot of people who have pelvic floor pain or vaginismus, other sorts of vaginal problems. Sometimes there's pelvic pain. It might be because of an injury, pregnancy, pelvic surgery, age, weight, anxiety often, really so many things. So I'll ask them to first go to their OB or GYN, whoever, and that they see a pelvic floor physical therapist. I honestly didn't know until I was well into the field that pelvic floor physical therapists exist, and they're amazing. So they'll work with people to strengthen those muscles. And a lot of times that with sex therapy will really help them.
Nicole also asked in the chat and said that they are hoping to open their practice to gender dysmorphic clients, but need to know more. Do you have any books to recommend?
Specifically, none are coming to my mind right this second, though I probably, if I look at my bookshelf behind me, I might. I think the most important thing always, though, is to be sensitive to who the person is, find out what's important to them. And you over time will start to learn about this is what's important to somebody who's experiencing any sort of gender dysmorphia or anything else, because there are maybe things I did at the very beginning of my clinical practice that I would never do or say now. I think we just like learn over time. So I don't exactly know about the book. But I could find one, and if I do, I'll include it with this PowerPoint, okay? So to be a sex positive therapist, you just need to be aware of these things, okay? So nobody's gonna be an expert. You all could ask me about some nuance within anything like within kink, and I might not know what it is. That's okay. You guys cannot be the expert on everything, but I think we need to be open to these discussions and open to learning about all of these different things for our clients. You've got to be able to say the word sex. Don't say in the time we are together or adult relations or whatever. I have clients who say we were together last night. I'm like, okay, yes, but like, let's just say it so that we can have a more honest discussion. And of course, culturally, that might not always be appropriate, but with these people, they just kind of dance around it. We want to ask for clarification if you're unsure. We want to understand that everybody's sexuality is different. It's all personal. It's not scary to talk about sex. You do not have to refer your clients to a sex therapist because they want to talk to you about sex. Everybody can do that, and we can celebrate our clients as they come to us. I think this is important, not just for queer affirming care, but for anything. There's affirming, okay, I affirm you, I'm competent, all right, fine, but how do we really know that we're competent? And then we celebrate our clients. And I think that that's where we're going. That's the goal. You can reach out to an AASECT professional if you want, but I think you can really just keep on learning and have everything you need to know. There's a ton of resources at the end, and this is just a resource that was for something else, but there's lots of resources you could pass out to your clients, maybe if they need to learn about gender. I know you guys have this in the program here at the Chicago School. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. And we have just a quick few minutes if anyone has any quick questions.
Where do you get the resources?
These are, well, I'll send them.
Oh, you'll send them?
Yeah, I can send this and then you guys can have them. These are just things that I have accumulated as I've worked with different clients. And so a lot of them are still applicable. Some of them age out and I get rid of them, but yeah, they're just things I've collected. Anything else? I really
I
appreciate
actually
it.
have, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
My question is, because this is my field as well of interest.
Mhm.
So I know that talking to this other association, they said that a lot of, actually, no, not an association. I was talking to the Queen's, oh my God, I forgot the name. Well, he told me that he's not a licensed through ASECT for sexual therapy, because back in his day, back in 19 something when he started, 1983, if I'm not mistaken, he said
Mhm.
that he didn't need it. So now I know that ASEC provides these licensures or certifications. Do you recommend that, or do you think we need it?
I think systemically there are critiques of ASECT like all organizations, and it often, like many, are criticized for money, like making things complicated and make it cost a lot of money. So I'll first say that there are a lot of critiques of ASECT. But in general, it provides a very, very strong and thorough background in sex everything. And it takes a long time. And you know, if a clinician is ASECT certified, that they've worked very hard on that. There are other certifications out there. No certification, though, is going to benefit you in terms of like billing insurance. It's mostly, do you have what you need to provide to the client? So that's why I think, yes, the certification is great. It will give you a ton of clients. People will find you, but we could all have this information and be able to work with clients, even if you don't want to go down the route of an official certification, because there's pros and cons to that as well.
So basically just keep the certification that you're required for your state for that area.
Your license, and then as much training as you can go to, I think is just as helpful.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mhm. All right, well, in the chat is the evaluation, or you all are talking about it. I'm not sure if it's even there. I super appreciate you being here. Yeah, people definitely reach out if you have the credential that's in the chat. They definitely reach out. Your caseload will be huge. But if you have the limitations in terms of finances, or you don't want to spend all of the time, I think you could learn just as much. But we have to also be careful that we're not saying we're certified if we're not. You can say, I have lots of training, I've spent this amount of time researching, and then if clients want to come to you or not, that's up to them. I think referrals are everything. And once in your town, they know that you want to talk about sex, you'll be booked. That's at least been my experience. I have no time. So it's a really, really important topic. And I appreciate you all being here so much. If you want to stick around, cool, but I'm going to stop the recording and let you all go so you can go to your other stuff. Thank you, everyone.